Okay, 3, 2, 1. There we go.
And we're back.
And we're back. One more time with feeling. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Good, man. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Oh, it's great to see you. I'm down in Mexico today, and
And I'm not.
And you're not.
I'm
I'm
not.
actually not that far away from you. I'm just over the border here a little bit.
Yeah.
We're doing some work on Cynthia's health, and that's all well and good, and it's going great.
Say hablar español and put her help.
Habla español. Una margarita, por favor.
¿Dónde está ese? Anyway, yeah.
Is it drinking? Yeah. Hey, we got a show lined up today.
Yeah.
I love doing these lives because live TV. I mean, I'm going to date myself with this, but you go back to the Milton Berle days and on live TV when Imogene Coca, and I mean, those of you that are younger than younger than my younger than my son and daughter, and younger than your sons, probably don't remember these names. But live TV was a hoot. You never knew what you were going to get.
Oh my!
I mean, they'd rehearse and everything, and they had plans, but it would just kind of go off. These are live shows. Yeah, the power of you live. The power of you is not dead. It's live. You've got to be alive to actually show up here. So I'm looking forward to today because we're working with something that everybody has heard about, but I don't think a lot of people, and you and I both have had conversations about this. A lot of people don't really understand what it is, and it's mindset. What's the mindset? Well, what do you mean by mindset? It's kind of like, we talked about trust in some of the previous episodes. People don't have a clue what trust is.
Right.
They know it when they've got it. It's kind of like good art. Well, it's the eye of the beholder. What is mindset? So we're going to unbundle mindset today. That's the intent. Just to kind of give people an overview.
Yeah, that's our intention. And we're going to try to do it 3 months worth of work in less than an hour and spend some time. But it's fun because a lot of the, during our conversations, as we kind of get on and we've done this now for bunches of weeks, and we'll be doing this every Thursday as far as we can see down the future. So keep coming back if you're enjoying this today. But a lot of us, we talk about words, and you hear people say words, right, without context and without meaning behind them. And that's why we talk about decisions, we talked about trust, and we talk about, and one of the things that we lean into a lot is that thing around mindset. So I'm pretty excited today just to kind of unpack. Last week was consciousness.
Yes.
Awareness, right? And so I love having a chance to come in and have that moment where this is, when we say mindset, at least from our perspective, this is what we're talking about.
And here's the definition that we're going to be operating off of.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody very wise actually came up with this definition. So
I don't know where that came from.
I don't either.
What?
There it is.
Some guy named Blaine Bartlett said, mindset is the enabling force that determines whether leadership is effective or accidental. It is the ground from which all behavior and strategy emerge. And I don't know if you know this guy.
The end.
I don't know if you know this guy.
I've heard of his name. I've heard his name. He actually wrote a book where this came out of. It's called, I think it's called Leadership Mindset Weekly. Yeah.
A whole book.
The Leadership Mindset Weekly. As a matter of fact, there's a whole program that was designed around leadership mindset.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug here.
Shameless plug. No, it's and I love this, being a fan of the book and having studied it for, many years now. It's interesting when you talk about this. What I love about this is that last sentence is I love all of it, but it is the ground from which all behavior and strategy emerge.
Right.
And it is that place where this, we talk about growth, and Mary Morrissey talks about being on the green growing edge, and it is the ground from all behavior and strategy emerge. It's mindset.
Everything comes out of it. Well, you and I were talking just before we went live here, and there's an old computer term that's called terminate stay resident, TSR. Yeah, and with the old DOS systems.
Oh my goodness.
When you would boot up your computer or PC, and it was a PC at that point in time, there were some basic programs, small little kernel programs that booted into the memory of the computer, and they were called TSR, terminal stay resident programs. They would boot up, and then they were used as the basis to kind of coordinate the operating systems running. And if these TSRs didn't kick into play, the operating system it wouldn't engage. And so in that sense, mindset is kind of like it's the TSR that governs everything that we do when we boot up in the morning. We wake up in the morning, eyes pipe open, TSR lands itself where it's supposed to land, and then the operating system called me starts to do what it does. It's the ground of being.
It is for you, and for all you old computer geeks watching this, by the way, break out your copy of Edlin, create your autoexec.bat, put them all in. We'll leave that alone. Yep. I'll leave it alone. We'll go from there. But it is that resident thing, right? That runs programs, that does stuff in the background.
Do not screw with autoexec.bat. Oops. What do you mean, oops? Well, that's kind of what we're looking at here today, because the mindset, and it's the enabling force that determines whether leadership is effective or accidental. And if you aren't aware of what the TSR function is of your leadership, I don't care what you're planning on doing, if it goes counter to what is in place programmatically, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. You can't get there from here because the operating system won't allow it to happen.
You just can't do it. Very true. Very, very true. But I love that statement. That guy's pretty sharp. I think he's okay. So
I think so. So just kind of clarifying this a little bit more, here is an actual definition of mindset, and I'm going to give some attribution here. Our mutual friend Bob Proctor, I've worked with him, and you sat with him a number of times, but he and I developed a number of programs together and taught together as a good friend. And this is one way that he described a mindset. It's a mental program that has almost exclusive, and I mean almost exclusive, control over our habitual behavior. And where this is interesting is 95% of our behavior is habitual and out of awareness. It's subconscious. This is where that TSR programs pieces start to come into play here. 95% of our behavior is habitual, and it's out of sight, out of mind, terminated and it stayed resident. And we learned something, and it dropped in, and it keeps operating. We're not aware that it's operating, but it keeps spinning its wheels,
right,
and influencing what it is that we're doing. So this is what we want to explore today. This is, as a leader, you have to be aware of what's going on in this thing that we call mindset. We're always in a mindset of some sort. That's it's not a question of going and finding a mindset. It's already running. It's already running. But understanding the dynamic of it gives you leverage to be able to begin to tweak and tune it so that it is now serving this new operating system that you're trying to employ, called your leadership effectiveness.
Great. Someday we'll have to do the stick man someday. We'll have to do that.
We'll do the stick man.
Paradigms. We'll have to do that
stick
sometime.
Person. Just politically correct here.
I'm sorry. Person. I know. To the stick being.
Stick being, yes.
Stick being. But it is about that. That's our focus with the power of you.
And that's where this poem actually, I think, comes into play. Every program, and I'll just speak for myself here, but every program that I do, or every consulting or coaching interaction that I have, at least on the front end, I'm going to bring this poem into play. I've stumbled on this poem probably 20 some plus years ago. And it illuminates what it is that we're talking about when we're referencing the importance and the criticality of understanding what mindset is and understanding how to actually work with it. And how this works is, you can read this as well as Doland and I can speak it, but here, the range of what I think and do is limited by what I fail to notice. Now, that makes sense. If I can't notice something, I'm just going to continue operating. We've all heard operating inside the box, get out of the box. Well, when you're
Right.
inside the box, you don't know that you're in the box. And the range of what I think can do is limited by not noticing that I'm in a box. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
range of what I think can do is limited by not recognizing that there's a mindset component in play for me in my life in this domain that we call leadership.
Yeah.
And because we fail to notice it, there's little I can do to change. I mean, you think about that, that makes sense too. Until I can notice something, I'm going to continue doing the same thing I've always done. And, we joke about this, but, you and I both have got grandkids. And, they'll do
Yes.
something really boneheaded. It's kind of, well, why'd you do that? Oh, I don't know. But you knew better, right?
Right.
Uh-huh. But then why'd you do it?
The-
I don't know.
I don't exactly.
I don't know. It is because they're not
Yeah.
noticing that there's something in play here. And this, you look at some of your team members and they do some boneheaded things. It's kind of like, I thought we said we agreed we're going that direction. Well, we did. Well, how come we did that? I don't
Right.
know. Well, you knew better, right? Uh-huh. Well, why did we do that? Well, I don't know. Like, it drives people crazy. It drives leaders crazy. And until we notice how failing to notice shapes our thoughts and deeds, we're not going to change anything. And that's the whole purpose of today's episode of The Power of You,
Yeah.
is beginning to notice how not noticing is compromising your effectiveness.
Yeah. Ditto.
Until you know that,
Do you know
you're dead
that?
in the water.
You don't know. It's one of my favorite.
No.
There's a guy out there. His name is Bill Caskey, and every now and then I'll hear Bill say something. Hey, Bill, how are you? But every now and then I'll hear Bill say something. Fish don't know they're swimming in water. That's
so true.
Do you notice what you're noticing? You can't shape thoughts. You can't shape your deeds. You can't do it. So it'll be fun today. This will be a great conversation. And I love this poem. I pull this poem out pretty frequently. This is a good one.
It kind of level sets some conversations. I'm gonna be hold the mirror up to you every now and then. Well, what do you mean hold the mirror up? Well, here's what we're doing.
Yeah.
What are you noticing?
Yeah.
So all of this is in service of this thing that we're calling leadership. And Dr. White, take it away.
Yeah, we'll just, we talk about this every time we're on, and you'll hear us, repetition, right, creates habits. And one of the habits is thinking. And when we think, there's a piece around from when we're leading. We lead ourselves, we lead businesses, we lead families, we lead kids, we lead grandkids, we lead all the things that we lead neighbors, all the up, down, left, right, below, and above us. And because of the experience that we're having. And one of the things from a thinking perspective that Blaine and I talk about, and we share this with all of our clients, and we just got off a call talking about this a couple of minutes ago with a client, which is our concept of our definition of leadership. And leadership is the leaders cause movement. That's the very first thing. And movement, in order to move, there's friction. In order to create friction, there's heat. In order to have heat, there's light. So you can't have those things. And leadership, when orchestrated with this concept, and this is a definition that we use all the time, which is it's the activity of influencing others, not dictating, influencing others to co-create together coordinated movement that we've agreed to with accountability and trust built in, movement, which is that thing that we accomplish, that we do as leaders in pursuit of a worthy ideal. And we're going to talk about worthy ideal here in a couple more slides. But I would encourage you, if you haven't heard us talk about this before, grab a little screenshot of this slide and listen to this one more time. Leadership is the activity of influencing. It's not activity for the sake of activity, the activity of influencing others, those other people. It'd be so much easier if there weren't other people. Others to co-create, we're creating together We're not doing command and control. Coordinated means we have a plan, we have accountability, we have trust, communication, movement in pursuit of the worthy ideal. And when we get to worthy ideal, you'll hear us say things like the worthy ideal is not a 10% price increase. And it's
Right.
not I'm going to grow my client base from 2 to 12. That's awesome. Those are things. You got to do those things. The worthy ideal is much more than that. So that's our definition of leadership. And if you take it apart and you think of what you're doing in your day as you're heading into a meeting, what is the activity that I'm pursuing? What is it that I'm influencing? Who am I influencing? What are we co-creating? What does coordinated movement look like for us to do this together? Which means you need their input and their opinion and their, what we would proverbially call buy-in, even though it's not buy-in, in pursuit of a worthy ideal, which ties in the mindset.
As a matter of fact, that mindset tie-in is present with each one of these areas. Influencing is a state
Always.
of being. How do I show up? What's my state of being? That is influenced by the mindset I hold about who I am, where I think I belong. I mean, if we're talking about terminate the resident programs, there are two questions that are operating in every organization, with every person in every organization. Who am I and where do I belong? People don't consciously think about those questions, but those questions are booted into the minute I walk into the company door. Who am I? Where do I belong? I'm not the kind of person who would. I have this position, this role. All of that stuff comes into play here. All of which influences how I influence, and it also impacts how we co-create coordinated movement with each other in pursuit of that worthy ideal. And the question that we're unbundling here is, how do we begin to work with this? And we've got a couple of models. Obviously, we're not going to belabor these models today. We've talked about them on every one of these Power of You episodes. But these two reference models are the ones that are, from our perspective, most useful when we're working with leaders looking to enhance their effectiveness in order to, and this isn't the worthy ideal notion here, but in order to scale more effectively their business, whatever their business might be. And by scaling, we're talking about becoming better at what they're doing, perhaps bigger than what they currently are. But those aren't necessarily worthy ideals. Okay, that scaling question is something that leadership applies itself to. How you go about scaling something has to do with the worthy ideal that's embedded in the desire to scale, as an example. So when we're looking at these models, we're going to unbundle these here a little bit and take this one here. As you looked at that previous model, and I'll just back it up here real quick. The leadership universe, this is the universe in which leaders actually operate. And most leaders typically will organize their behavior, their movement with others around three primary questions. Why are we doing this? What's the direction we're going? And then how do we go about achieving that? Which is the vision, the strategy, and the tactics. That's where almost all leadership development work takes place, is at those three levels. And when we're exploring mindset, this is one area that is absolutely ripe for exploration, because oftentimes we'll set a vision, but there's no inspiration in it. So it ends up being a question of, how do I motivate people? And there's a mindset distinction between inspiration and motivation. A huge mindset distinction, and that shows up in behavior. And then we drop below, and we'll talk about this as well here, into the mindset domain and the spirit and soul, which are interconnected. And that interconnection piece has to do with imagination, again, which we'll talk about here in just a bit. The four pillars are the foundation on which all of this work takes place.
Perfect. The four pillars provide that it is a structure. So when we think about mindset and spirit and soul, the four pillars there are structural components to support mindset and support spirit and soul. We think about and probably not the right term, Blaine, but if we think about executing, so what do I do with it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean? And so we talk about trust and autonomy. Trust is, there's 4 parts. I trust me, you trust you, I trust you, you trust me. Right? There's 4 parts of that. Autonomy is the willingness to try, and based on trust. Communication and transparency is that it's pivotal, hinges off of it. Growth and innovation can't occur without trust and autonomy, and communication and transparency. And systems of accountability is not, and I haven't said this for a while. It's been like 4 calls since I've said this. So I'm going to say it today. It is not Trello, and it is not an Excel spreadsheet. The systems of accountability is our mutual agreement that we make with each other. And yes, you have to measure things, and there's Drucker things involved in it. But accountability is that commitment that I make with you based on trust, that I live into, that I create my mindset and my spirit. I'm connected to that accountability. And together, we move towards that worthy ideal. And that's what systems of accountability do. This one.
There we go.
Yeah, so it's funny. Go ahead. Well, because as you can tell, this is well rehearsed.
It's live. It's live.
And thinking about mindset, well, when we were talking about doing this, it's like, dude, we need to stop. We need to really talk about mindset, because it's like saying I'm going, to the doctor. Is it a dentist, chiropractor, podiatrist? Where are you going? What are you doing? And when you think about this, there's a lot of there's an off-color joke that just came to my mind, so I had the moment of pause there to relive that joke. But when you think about that, the busy leader's illusion, there's a lot of what we do that lives into the why, what, how, right? Vision, strategy, tactics, right? That goes into it. And when the impact of living in those 3 layers as a leader, because when we look busy, there is this illusion that we're succeeding. I'm looking busy. I look busy, right? Look at all of the things I'm doing. God, today I had 12 meetings. Look at the things I'm doing. So there's the busy leader's illusion, which is fun, because now it's like, okay, so if you're living in the how, if we flip them, let's start from the bottom. If I'm living in the why, then I'm living in a zone where it literally becomes motivation without impact. So now as a leader, I'm not, first of all, I'm not fulfilled. I will cook myself.
Right. And my people.
Yes.
That whole carrot, motivation is a carrot and stick approach to leading.
Yep.
Yeah. Motivation by definition is an external reward system that does not tap into something that's meaningful for the people that are working, which is why there's lack of impact.
Right. And then if you go to when you're living in the what, which activity without alignment, it is that in that case, without creating a longer sentence there, it is without alignment with the for the sake of what, with the worthy ideal that we're moving toward. And you may be aligned with a thing. I'm going to grow revenue. I'm going to blah, 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 blah. You're going to do this I call it an outcome. I'm going to get this outcome. And I'm busy. I'm working towards that outcome. But you're out of alignment with worthy ideal, core values, the culture and tenets of the business. So if you're living in that what zone, most of the time you're going to be out of alignment. And when you're out of alignment, to your point, Blaine, team's out of alignment. When the team is out of alignment, there's no getting there.
Which puts you right directly into that how piece, because all of a sudden now your focus as a leader is on micromanaging because they aren't aligned. They aren't executing. They aren't doing it right.
Yeah.
And that will create a burnout scenario faster than you can imagine.
Yeah. And I love that statement, because it suddenly becomes them.
Yep. It's no longer us. And if you're looking at co-creating coordinated movement, you can't have a them in co-creation.
No, it's those other people. Boy, if they only did what I told them to do. Nobody can do it as good as I can. I've got well, anyway, but yeah. We could digress there and get in a lot of trouble today. So
we've been kind of dancing around this question for the sake of what. I mean, this is what makes this conversation around mindset so relevant. It's a shift from a focus on outcome. Whatever that outcome might be, a 15-20% increase in revenue growth, or whatever it might be, as the end all be all. The question for the sake of what begs is literally what matters in doing that 15% revenue increase. Why does that make a difference? Now, you can create the business case scenario. It makes a difference for the business because now we've got possibility of 14% increase in market share or whatever, blah, blah, blah. That's not what we're looking at here. Okay, that's not what it is. What matters is something that resides inside each individual on your team, in your organization, in your family. What matters? What do I get to have, do, or be as a consequence of achieving this objective or moving in the direction of that objective? Yeah. What do I get to have, do, or be that I wouldn't get to have, do, or be if this wasn't in process?
Right.
That's for the sake of what, and that's where the worthy ideal starts to come into play.
Yeah.
Here's our objective. Why does it matter to you?
Why exactly? Why? And it's funny because one of the things, and this is a challenge for leaders with their teams, and I think it's easy to lose track. There's a consensus sometimes that a worthy ideal is a thing, one thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you have 102 people in your organization, it's 102 worthy ideals.
Yep.
Because it's a very personal, and they align with individuals, but there's also an alignment with the worthy ideal, right, for the organization. But there is that it's a very, very personal thing, right? The worthy ideal. And
it can't be told to somebody.
No.
This is the challenge for a lot of leaders, is it requires you being vulnerable enough to ask a question. Why would this matter to you? And be in a position of hearing them come back to you saying, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me. Yeah. I know you're the boss and you're telling me that I need to do it, but it personally doesn't matter to me.
Right.
Okay. That opens up an interesting place for you to go as a leader, because if it doesn't matter to them, you're going to get compliance. You're not going to get commitment. And you'll get compliance because, you're signing their paycheck.
Right.
But you need to have commitment if you're looking to scale effectively your organization. You can't scale effectively. You can't grow effectively without commitment as one of the starting places.
Yeah, it's funny, and compliance always has that punitive nature to it.
Mm-hmm.
Compliance is carrot. I do this, I get that. Therefore, I'm gonna comply and move on, because this too shall pass. So,
and this is where the mindset comes in, and there's a mindset in play with this that has to do with, just in a general way. I'm the employee, you're the boss. That's a mindset that has to do with role differentiation, role distinction. You tell me, Mr.
Right.
Ms. Boss, what I'm supposed to do, and then I'll go do it. That's a mindset that is steeped in what has historically been an organizational structure that was born out of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, command and control comes into play with this.
Yeah.
Those leaders very rarely asked, what do you think about this, to the workers that were on the assembly line. That wasn't the question that was asked. You're a cog in a wheel. Continue to go around and around until you wear out, and then we'll replace you with another cog in that wheel.
Yes, that age-old is there. Any other opinions in the room? So yes. Yeah. So that's for the sake of what? That's why when we go back, harken back a few slides to definitional leadership. When we talk about that at the end, moving towards that worthy ideal, this is the word that that is the worthy ideal that you're moving towards. That is the completion of that equation, right? Influencing others to co-create coordinated movement in pursuit of the world. Oh, and there it is on that side. Speaking of,
there you go, influencing others.
This is shameless plug week, by the way. I had to do this in the slides. So I'm going to go get some Blaineisms. I'm going to go get these things and put these in here. But it's funny because as we're focusing really on, a lot of leaders there's a tendency to live in those top three layers, and there's a price that pays, that you pay living in those top three layers without mastering mindset. Or, well, I'm still trying to master mindset every day, or you're focusing on spirit. Yeah, exactly. Being an apprentice, but it is that, when you think about it, awareness creates choice. Leaders with more awareness have more influence. And there's 1,000 times that we say stuff. It's kind of like when we read a book. I read, Troward's Spirit of Opulence daily for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
And I discovered, inevitably, wait a minute, that wasn't there before. Where was that before? And when we think about that, leadership is the activity of influencing. And related to awareness creates choice, mindset. Leaders with more awareness have more influence.
Right. Because they have more choice. And in any system, the element in the system that has the most choices available to it will actually be the dominant element in the system. That's called the law of requisite variety, for those of you that are interested in systems thinking. But that law of requisite variety, the element in the system that has the most response choices available to it, will actually be the dominant element in the system over time. And this is why you want to be able to explore mindset, because the more you can explore it, the more awareness you have about what's in operation. Right. All of a sudden now, different choices become visible that weren't visible before, both for you as well as for the folks with whom you're actually interacting. And if they can see different choices, now different possibilities emerge. And as soon as you can land on different possibilities as something that's out there, now it's a question of how do we make it probable, rather than fairy tale.
Right.
And that's how this begins to work. It's a multiplier effect, and that's we've got spirit and soul lined out here that kind of is underneath mindset. Every organism in this universe seeks to express itself as fully as it possibly can. That's true for a plant in your garden. It's true for you as a human being. It's also true for your organization, your team. It wants to express itself as fully as possible. What happens is that mindset structure that we develop as we live, we develop a mindset that becomes reified. It becomes almost like a concrete cap that sits on top of spirit and soul. And when you walk into an organization that is not working effectively, you will notice that it does not feel alive. It doesn't feel vibrant. And that's because the operational mindset, you can call it culture. That's another way to describe this in an organization sense, is put a lid on what's possible. The value in exploring mindset, because you're always going to have one. It's always going to be present. But the good news about that is it contains all kinds of juicy stuff when you can begin to access it.
Yes.
And how we've done things before doesn't mean we have to do it this way again. It's kind of like, what if? The question, what if, begins to uncover all kinds of things, which is where, and you don't see it on this particular slide, but that's where the use of the imagination comes into play.
Right.
You start imagining different future states.
Yeah. It's funny. It's you go ahead anyway. I was
no.
It's funny when you talk about that, because as we think about that, right, which is and I know you guys are looking at this slide and we're going, there's got to be more slides. There's more slides, but if we're stopping here for a moment, right, and to that point, awareness creates choice, and I love talking about the law because it's a very important thing. Very few leaders focus on how we're wired, how we work. What's the science of the mind, the science of the spirit, and how we function as humans. And we do requisite things as leaders, right? I'm going to do these things, and therefore I'm going to get to the other result, without the conscious effort to focus in on the spirit and the mindset involved in the spirit. But But when we think about this with awareness creating choice, and to your point, Blaine, it is that opportunity to think about the choices that we have in front of us, and then begin to ask other questions. And one of them that we focused on before with other clients is we can if. We can if, and you begin to move thought into action, thought into we talk about this when we talk about decision making. We begin to craft those steps so that as we're moving towards coordinated movement, we can if, and we're able to progress that forward. So anyway, so I love this leadership and mindset, and I've never thought about it this way before, but mindset is in effect the multiplying effect.
It is.
When companies, and you talk about this, you said this only in passing. One of the things that Blaine and I talk about with organizations is the difference between growth and scale. And scale is a multiplying effect. Growth is a one-to-one thing. And with mindset implemented properly, with an effort, it's almost impossible always to be proper with mindset. You're always learning. But as you're working with mindset, it does become that multiplier, not only for you, but for your business, for your teams. And that's where you used the word earlier, so I don't want to lose this. That's where scale takes place.
Right.
Scale takes place because you recognize choice, you're aware, and you have the influence to move those choices forward and ask qualifying questions. We can if.
We can. And that's the distinction between growth and scale. Growth is a linear construct. It's almost arithmetic. We can. Yep. Here's the curve. Scale, in the way we're talking about it, in the way that this multiplier component has to do. It's a phase shift. It's not a linear gradual sort of. It's a phase shift. All of a sudden, you're operating at a different plateau. You're thinking at a different level. You're thinking in a different way. And because you're thinking in a different way, you're noticing things that you've never noticed before. And because you're noticing things you've never noticed before, you now have leverage that you've never had before.
Right.
There's just a real interesting symbiosis that kind of creates its magic when you're actually playing with this.
Yeah.
Now, the difficulty that leaders have with this, why it's hard to drop into really exploring and leveraging mindset, is because going all the way back to the original definition, 95% of our behavior is habitual and subconscious.
Yes.
It's an operating program that is out of sight, out of mind, but it is incredibly powerful. We try to move our organization, we try to move ourselves with 5%, conscious thought, conscious intent, conscious objective, but 95% is in play. So it becomes really difficult to imagine a future state that isn't in some way a replication of what's always gone before. If you're working with mindset effectively, all of a sudden you've got brand new ideas, and it's not a function of what went before. The problem we have is that almost always there's a loop here. We think the same thoughts. We got a problem that shows up, and it triggers our thinking, and we start thinking the same thoughts we've always thought before. Well, this is going to be hard. This has never worked before. We think the same thoughts we've always thought before, which produces the same chemicals in our body. Thoughts have a physiological component to them, and that chemicals in our body creates feelings. Emotions are a chemical response to a thought process. How I describe something determines how I feel about it, which signals genes in my body to begin behaving in a certain way. So how I think determines how I feel determines how I behave. And it becomes this loop. And pretty soon what you're doing is you're thinking, feeling, behaving, thinking, feeling, behaving. And all of a sudden now you skip a beat. Now you're feeling, behaving, thinking, feeling, behaving, thinking. And you start feeling the way you're thinking. And this is why it gets reified. It's a reinforcing loop that is really difficult to pop out of unless you're paying attention to it. This is why the noticing piece comes into play.
Right.
When you begin to notice, I was triggered here. What was that about? Or I heard myself say the same thing last week to a similar issue. what if I
Yes.
said something different? Or I asked a different question than I've ever asked before. What
Yeah.
if?
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. I am retaking we're both believers in meditation. And I won't call it on a lark but I decided I'm gonna revisit some of the principles of meditation. And one of the things that came out of that revisitation was curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Was leveraging curiosity. Without leveraging curiosity, when we're in this loop, why am I here? What if we did something different? Ask that different question and look for the result. And be curious. Be curious. Explore it. So,
And this is where the power of really clearly identifying for the sake of what comes into play here.
exactly.
Because if you've got for the sake of what is an attractor, it's kind of like, ooh, I'm being pulled towards that.
Yeah.
And that begins to generate a different question. So we're always going to be facing problems in organizations. There's no question about that. Problem solving is, conversations that take place in organizations almost always, in some way, shape, or form, organize around solving a problem.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is almost always, and this is where this loop comes into play here, we start looking for solutions that have solved the problem before.
Yeah, way back there.
It's a backward look. Yeah.
Yeah.
We think the same. Well, I've seen this problem before. I know what to do here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the emotional feeling is I want to get. The feeling is this is an obstacle. This is a barrier. It doesn't feel. We got to solve this problem.
Yeah.
So the whole focus is on making the problem go away. When you have a for the sake of what in place, you're still going to be looking back, but instead of looking for a solution to get rid of the problem, you're going to be looking for a solution that addresses the problem, but moves you one step closer to that worthy ideal, that for the sake of what. You end up selecting different solutions than you've ever thought of selecting before. And all of a sudden, you find yourself in territory where you're now dealing with problems you've never had before, which is wonderful news.
Right. Because now you're on a path. You're on a new part of the path you've never seen before.
You're in new territory.
Yeah. And we don't know. We're discovering things as we go. We're going to discover.
There you go.
Yeah.
So,
love that. So Blaine and I were chuckling before this. So I'm going to leave it alone for just a moment. Why it's hard to drop into mindset. And the bullets are here, right? We're trained to do, not to be, fear of discovering, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, ego-driven patterns, right? The egoic part of who we are. Stillness is strength. You can't lead others if you haven't led yourself. No immediate ROI. So there are things that, and I think the first one we did of these, God blame, weeks, months ago, was on the 5 lies. And some of these kind of are derivatives of some of the things we talk about when we talk about the 5 lies. And when you think about this, there is a thinking from a leader's perspective in, we'll call it schooling, a school of thought on, I'm living in the vision, strategy, tactics sphere. That's where I'm living. And in order to get to the other place, I've got to like stop what I'm doing, and I've got to drop it. I've got to get in there. I got to go, and I got to go find a place to sit, and I'm going to do the lotus position and light some candles, and I'm going to get there, right? I'm going to get there, right? Well, it actually turns out that there's no dropping in the mindset.
Right. You're already in it.
You're in the moment you, well, not even before, as you draw breath, because your mindset continues to work while you sleep. But as you draw breath, you're in mindset. So one of the things to think about as a leader, and at all times through all of these, when we think about the leadership universe and the triangle that we put with imagination on there as well, which we should add that in permanently, elegantly in there. That's an important piece that we don't want to lose track of. But as you think about that, There's no dropping. There's no stopping to drop into mindset.
There's just noticing it.
Exactly. There is that pause where you notice what you're noticing, and you're curious. That was the equanimity piece, the curious piece. Why am I hearing this when I meditate? Why am I thinking this way when I'm walking into the meeting? What am I afraid of when I'm going to go step into my boss's office? What am I? It is that notice, that moment of notice, where you become aware. And because you take time, it could be in seconds. This isn't a 20-minute exercise where you've got to lock yourself in the stall in the bathroom before you go to a meeting. This is moments to notice where you are, notice your mindset, notice your thinking, notice your awareness. And by leveraging, by being aware of that, noticing what you're noticing, you will shift the result.
And the way you begin to do that, and there is a support system for this. We talked about the 4 pillars earlier. Yeah. The mindset lives in the leadership universe. That's part and parcel of the leadership universe. I mean, that's all the leadership universe is mindset. And we've discreetly broken out some levels in it. But in terms of actually beginning to fruitfully explore the mindset that is operating in yourself and in your organization, here's the way that we actually work with this. And it has to do with these 4 pillars.
Yeah, and when you think about it, and just I'll touch on them relatively quickly, but it is, and when we're thinking about, we talked a little bit about trust and autonomy, and we spent a lot of time on trust in the mastermind. Autonomy is the willingness to try, and your willingness to let people try and fail and try and fail. It is that mindset determines whether you lead from what was or what could be, from the zone of possibility. And communication transparency, it governs whether you speak possibly or defend from fear, which is noticing what you're noticing. That's that awareness. And what is it that I'm afraid of?
Yeah, and that speaking possibility is not just so much the language that you're using, although that's certainly part of it. It's again your presence. How do you influence? Your state of being. Are you somebody that shows up as an invitation to collaborate with? Do you speak the possibility of the future? Just by your presence before you open your mouth. Or are you defending the status quo? Because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't have a 5% increase.
Am I right? From a position of fear. Innovation. It's funny. I just had a call with one of my clients this morning, and we were talking specifically around the growth-oriented mindset sees failure as feedback and possibility as the norm. When you think about that, the things that we do, and with growth and innovation is that trying, right? The willing to test, the willing to think differently, and then taking from that what you learn. We talk about scale, right? What do we scale up, down? Because scale is bidirectional. Scale is not singular, right? I can do more of good, less of bad. I can do things, right? So when it was fun because we had that conversation around what did we learn that gives us feedback. So a couple of things. So that the things that we learned that were great, how do we grow those? How do we innovate around those ideas?
That's where spirit starts to pop back up. When you're working with mindset, you make room for spirit to begin to express itself.
And then, of course, I've talked a little bit about accountability systems before. When I was not a Trello board, got on my soapbox already, but it is that, and you touched on this with that us those guys, the old sales and marketing battle. All those marketing people. No, they don't. It makes me sound like Foghorn Leghorn. So. It's a cartoon character for you old. But
big chicken.
But when you're thinking about that, that strong mindset, right, from a systems of accountability. It's that commitment to and with each other that builds cultures of ownership. We co-own the worthy idea. We co-own. We don't blame. We co-own, and we co-own the steps in that process. Some will work, some will not.
Yeah, and that worthy ideal, again, just to reinforce that point, it's individual. So when we're talking about cultures of ownership, people own something that's meaningful to them, that aspiration. They're not going to own the company's goals and objectives. They're going to own that for the sake of what? Why does it matter to me? I'm going to own that. And as we start moving forward, I'm going to feel a strong need to make sure that I'm doing, and this is where agency comes back into play here, an autonomy. Yeah, I'm going to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do, including voicing. I'm seeing you're not pulling something here. You said you were going to do that. You didn't do it. There's an accountability chain that's in place here. I need you to pull your weight, because in order for me to have what I say is important to me, if you're not delivering, I'm compromised. That's different than the boss going, okay, who's accountable here for this for this FUBAR?
Who's at fault? Exactly.
Who's at fault?
Different definition of accountability. Who's at fault? Because I'm gonna take you up to the woodshed. All right.
Exactly. Which is where we get these symptoms. Yeah. If you're not exploring your mindset on an ongoing basis, if you don't have an organization that is set up to generatively explore what are we thinking? What are we thinking? And I mean that very literally. What are we thinking? This is some of the symptoms that you're going to be able to identify. I mean, you're going to start feeling overwhelmed and undervalued and underutilized. I mean, it becomes a reactive process. We've always done it this way. We've always done it this way. You bring a new idea to the table, it gets shot down reflexively. That sort of stuff.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I chuckled because there was a point in my career working with a company that shall remain nameless, Siemens, where I was told, and I'm an exec and I'm doing blah, 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 blah. And we were in a meeting and I was literally told, nope, we've always done it this way. We're not changing it. We're blah, blah, blah. It was very rote. And it led to exactly those feel overwhelmed, underutilized, which leads to the reciprocal part of it, which is then what am I doing here?
Yeah.
What value am I bringing? Because we all carry the burden of seeking self-value. How did I bring value today? And we want to feel valued. So when that happens,
feel valued.
Yeah. When that happens, we erode that self feeling of it. And there's, other things that happen, churn and other stuff.
And this is where you end up getting compliance, not commitment, which is you're delivering on the results. I'm doing what you told me to do. Yeah, here's my numbers, they prove it. But there's no innovation, there's no creativity, there's no passion, there's no aliveness, there's no vitality in it. And this is where organizations go to die. It really is.
That spiral of death.
That spiral of death.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if this continues, I mean, people start getting pissed off. I mean, this is you got folks in the organization, and this is where the data gets really interesting. Gallup has done a survey for at least the last 25 years that I'm aware of on employee engagement. How emotionally engaged are you in the work that you're doing? Fully 87 to 92% over 25 years, 87 to 92% of employees worldwide report being emotionally disengaged in some way from the work they're doing. They just, disengaged is another way of saying, I don't care about it. Yeah. Literally, I don't care about it. And that is, when I said this is where organizations go to die, that's exactly what we're talking about here. And this is a function of a mindset that is pervasive in most organizations that has to do with boss-subordinate relationships. It has to do with innovation, being able to give voice to something that I'm noticing. Who am I? Where do I belong? It's not my place. It's not my job. It's not my role. All of that stuff comes into play. And if people are in that place long enough, the toxicity begins to generate resentment, and disconnection.
Right. Yeah. And there's no coming back from disconnection.
Yep. Yeah. Once it's gone, that tripwire has generated a little bit of a landmine.
You've pulled it. All right. So 3 things you can do now. And we talked a little bit about these. And I wanted to put something, one of the things that so mindset this is a really important topic. Not that all our topics haven't been important, but
they're all important.
Yeah, they're all important. But I mean, look at us. Come on. But when when we think about it, I wanted to leave us today with, so what do you, take this, pause for awareness, take that moment, that space, those seconds to reflect, reflect, notice what you're noticing, to coin a phrase, become aware of that in your mindset, become aware. And check your inner voice. If you're hearing self-talk, if your self-talk is driven, whether your self-talk is driven by, if there's the old cartoons, right, with the little devil and the little angel, don't eat the spinach. No, eat the spinach. So speaking of Popeye, but when you are in that spot, listen to your talk, and and there's techniques. Maybe we'll do one on how to deal with fear sometime.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Because fear is a constant. Fear is a real thing. And then we talked earlier, Blaine, I love it when you say, just as a reminder to everybody, it's how you show up. And when you're leading with that identity, when you're leading with that clarity on who am I, not just do, and by asking yourself, who do I need to be for this to succeed?
Yeah.
Who do I need to be? And that could be team, family. There's all kinds of things that go into that. But I love that question. Who do I need to be in this moment?
In this moment for this to succeed.
Yep. In this moment, and live from that point. And it takes work and practice, but you do those.
How I describe something determines how I feel about it. So.
Right.
Generates behavior. Yeah.
Exactly. My favorite person with all of that is a brand new movie on July 11th, the brand new Superman movie.
Aha.
The 100th version of the Superman movie, by the way. But it's the new Superman movie coming out July 11th, taking my grandson. But when we think of that and Superman steps into that booth, who do I need to be? And I put the cape on. He doesn't wear the cape every day, but I put the cape on. And I am that. I am.
That's a great metaphor.
Yeah, I put the cape on. He sits on my desk every day. People don't know this, but in my office, I have a little Superman that sits on my desk. Right here.
That's great. I did not know that.
Sits right in front of me, and it is, who do I need to be to put the cape on today?
Perfect.
So,
I love that. So the question is, who do you need to be? Yeah. So that invites a question about the next steps. And one of the things that we know for certain, and this is, again, this is evidence of mindset in play.
Yeah.
Only about 20 to 30% of participants in any kind of a personal professional development program actually follows through on action plans unless there's additional support provided. That additional support is the spotlight on the mindset. It's, you said you were going to do this. Yeah, I know. Well, I'm noticing this. Oh, thank you for pointing that out to me. Now I can. So it's that illumination that a support group can actually bring that allows you to begin to move beyond what was as a habituated way of thinking into new territory. It will be uncomfortable, guaranteed. It will be uncomfortable. I mean, when you fold your arms in front of you, that's one way. You fold them the other way, you kind of have to pause and think of it. It's uncomfortable. It just doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
What we're working with here when we're looking at mindset, this is a mindset. This is a different version of a mindset. Both of them are possible. What's going to be most useful for me today? This worked well when I was 10 years old. Not so well when I'm 40. Maybe this will work better.
Yeah. Or 72. I mean,
72. Yeah. So have we got a suggestion for you?
Yeah.
Dolan and I, we mentioned this mastermind a couple of times. The Leadership Mindset Weekly is a book that I wrote during the pandemic that became the basis for this Leadership Mindset Mastermind. And this year, we've done four or five. We've done four so far.
This is fifth. This
four,
is fifth.
year-long program. We've done four of them. They have been wildly successful based on participants' reports. Yeah. This year, Dolan and I are collaborating. So we're going to be bringing some new content into this. And it's continuing to be a year-long program, a deep dive into this question of leadership mindset. It is the force multiplier. When you can begin to leverage this most effectively, you're going to be blown away by what you're going to be noticing in your organization and in your personal life in terms of your effectiveness. Comprehensive curriculum, access to private community. The mastermind goes beyond skills training. We're not going to be spending a lot of time. We spend some time, but not a lot of time on vision, strategy, and tactics. Almost the entire focus, 90% of the mastermind program is on mindset itself, hence the title. Okay. And we meet once a week. And you get Dolan and I facilitating a once a week meeting. And then we've got mastermind subgroups set up out of the large group, which is the spotlight group that illuminates what it is that you're going to be looking at and how you're going to be working. So this is the Leadership Mastermind. Excuse me.
Right.
Again, 52-week journey. We have a waiting list that we're putting together right now. We run these twice a year. And the next one is coming up. We have got a wait list that is filling up right now. So if you are interested, excuse me, in learning more, literally learning more about this mastermind than we have time to tell you here, join the wait list. Sign up on the wait list. Either Dolan or I, or sometimes both of us, will give you a call. And you'll be able to get all of your questions answered. We promise that your questions will be answered. Joining the wait list doesn't obligate you to anything. There's no deposit or anything else that's involved with that. It's just, I'd like more information on this leadership mindset mastermind. I'm interested in exploring my mindset. I want to be more effective. And I think this might be able to do it for me. So it's proven. Like I said, this is the 5th year we're doing this. Great reviews off of it. We can give you testimonials up the wazoo if you're interested.
That's a technical term, by the way. Wazoo's technical. So do that, and we would love to have a conversation with you and tell you what it is that we're doing and how it works, why it works, and mostly why it works, why we've seen the results that we've seen, and if it's the right thing for you, great. If it's not the right thing for you, great.
No harm, no foul.
Yep. It's an opportunity to have that conversation. So on that note, Dr. Bartlett.
It was a pleasure as always. I will see you next Thursday at noon for the next Power Review.
Indeed. I'll see you there. Thanks everybody for being here. Thank you.
Thanks folks. Take care.